I think they probably are realizing that they made a big, big mistake when they closed that hospital, because there are a lot of mental patients who were not able to go out and live on their own, never would be able to go out and live on their own. And it was really a very sad situation when these people were put out there.
I don't know if the system that we have set up right now to deal with the mentally ill is all that great. One of the negative side effects of deinstitutionalization was a lot of the patients who were deemed not worthy of a lot of more care, patients who maybe could function on their own, but they still had severe problems with depression and other such illnesses. A lot of times those people were just tossed out onto the street and became homeless.
There doesn't seem to be any place for these people to go. I know a lot of the people actually ended up on the street because they weren't able to maintain themselves in their apartments or the little homes in which they were put.
They would say, I just want to go home. It's unfortunate that their home was taken away from them.
Nobody ever said where the rest of them went. They just wrote articles of them coming back here and showing up on the doorsteps.
When they closed the facility, we had probably a half dozen patients that just gave up because they didn't want to leave.
When these asylums were shut down, there was a lot of criticisms about life in these asylums, but at the same time, you could argue it was better for someone to be confined in a hospital than it was for them to simply be thrown out on the street and be wandering the streets homeless.
When Reagan closed the state hospitals in California, and we thought it was unconscionable that they were going to be putting people out on the street without really having any good plan to care for the mentally ill that had been in those state hospitals.
When Peoria State was closing, patients were being transferred. A patient from 4C had been sent to Perino Nursing Home in Pekin. She was only there for a few days and walked back to Bartonville and was sitting on the steps of 4C about 6 a.m. one morning. With tears in her eyes, she said she had come home.
The mental health agencies, some of them are obsolete or not even in existence anymore.
Curbside therapy just doesn't work. It breaks my heart to see him walking the streets today in Peoria. I see many patients that I knew in Zeller, sunburned, physically dirty. That's not the way it should be.
I know from talking to some people who are in the know that when they admit somebody to psychiatric treatment in this area, inpatient treatment, they have to go all the way to Rockford. Well, the family has a heck of a time visiting them when they're up there. Plus, they don't keep them very long. They don't take them to court and require that they continue to take their medicines. They don't get that court ordered, and they could. So we have a revolving door.
Did things change? Absolutely. But more in the way the government treated patients. They wanted to go back to a smaller system and start putting these people back in their homes. Well, a big institution like this with all these cottages, it's just too expensive.
It was a good place for people to go to 100 years ago. And unfortunately, like every state hospital in the country, late 1930s on, they all grew so huge that services declined because the political systems didn't fund them to the extent that they needed to be funded. The institutions physically crumbled and psychologically crumbled.
They're the ones who let it deteriorate. It was just a shame because a lot of people suffered because of that. And a lot of families too, because a lot of these families, people who were really seriously ill, chronically ill, they didn't know what to do.
People were discharged, they were sent out into the community. A lot of them were just lost. There was no way the community could handle it all. Primarily because the hospitals were closed, the money didn't follow the patient.
When they closed Zeller, they said, we're going to have more treatment beds at the Methodist Hospital psychiatric facility. But there's no psychiatric beds anymore at OSF. There's no psychiatric beds over at Pekin Hospital, and there used to be.
And we did exactly what we always do. And that is, we took a good idea and we ruined it. And that's what we did. We did it in Illinois, and we did it everywhere else, in every other state in the union. Who was to blame for it? The politicians were to blame for it, because the funding wasn't made available to deal with these issues.
Every time our state gets in trouble, and they've been in trouble for years and years and years financially, they look at mental health as a way to cut the budget. By closing the big old rambling facilities that cost a lot of money, they were able to save money, but at the cost of mental health treatment.
The people in the area were very concerned about what was happening to the Peoria State Hospital. I can't say that I even met anyone who thought that was a good thing. I think they pretty much saw it for what it was. Politics.
And let's face it, when it comes to more money for someone's care who really doesn't complain, you ain't gonna get that money. And that happens, I think, even today.
We tried to find where the names were. And we contacted Springfield, and they said, well, the names for all the buried patients at Peoria State, the boxes were stored in a basement of a depository building. And it flooded, and all the records were ruined. There's no way of finding that now. So the patients that don't have their names on the stone probably will never be known.